My name is Margaret, and this is the story of how my perfect life turned into a nightmare the day my husband died. It all began one foggy morning when I woke up to the sound of silence. My husband, Richard, had gone out for his usual morning walk, but this time, he didn't come back. I remember pacing around the house, calling his phone again and again. No answer. Then, around 9 a.m., a police car stopped in front of our gate. 2 officers stepped out, their faces pale and serious. That moment, I knew. They told me Richard had suffered a heart attack while walking near the lake. He was gone instantly. Just like that, the man I had shared 25 years with vanished from my world. The days that followed were a blur. My daughter, Emily, came home from college, devastated. She was only 23, and Richard adored her more than life itself. After the funeral, our lawyer, Mr. Thompson, called us for the reading of Richard's will. I thought it would be a simple formality. We had built everything together, side by side. But when Mr. Thompson opened the envelope and began to read, my heart stopped. To my beloved daughter, Emily, I leave our family house and a trust fund of $10 million. To my wife, Margaret, I leave the lakeside cabin with the hope she finds peace there. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The cabin, that old wooden place Richard bought years ago to store fishing gear. I looked at Emily. Her face was pale with shock. "Mom," she whispered, "this has to be a mistake." But it wasn't. The lawyer cleared his throat and said, "Mr. Walker's wishes are very clear. Mrs. Walker." I felt the room spinning. 25 years of marriage. Through thick and thin, and all I got was a cabin in the woods. That night, I sat in the dark, holding Richard's old photo. "Why, Richard?" I whispered. "Why would you do this to me?" But the more I thought about it, the more something didn't feel right. Richard had always been fair, kind, and deeply loving. He wasn't the kind of man who'd leave me with nothing. Then, 2 days later, I received a plain white envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a small piece of paper, with just 3 words written in Richard's handwriting: "Go to the cabin." My heart skipped a beat. Was it a message he had written before he died? Or something else entirely? I didn't know then. But going to that cabin would change everything. Next morning, I packed a small bag and drove to the cabin. The sky was gray, and the road that led through the woods felt endless. As I drove, my mind kept racing. Why would Richard want me to go there? What could possibly be waiting for me? The cabin stood quietly by the edge of the lake, old, weathered, and surrounded by silence. The moment I stepped out of the car, a chill ran down my spine. I had always felt uneasy there. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Everything was coated in dust, just as Richard had left it. The air smelled faintly of pine and old wood. I set my bag down and noticed something strange. A photo frame lying face down on the table. I picked it up. It was a picture of Richard, Emily, and me, taken years ago, at this very lake. But on the back of the frame, there was a small piece of tape holding an envelope. My hands trembled as I peeled it open. Inside was a folded note. "If you're reading this, Maggie, I'm sorry. I had no choice. Trust no one, not even Emily. The answers are here. Look beneath the floorboards under the fireplace." For a moment, my whole body went cold. Not even Emily. Why would Richard say that about our daughter? She was everything to him. I knelt by the fireplace, brushing aside the dust and ashes. I felt along the edge of the floor until my fingers found a loose board. With effort, I pried it open. Inside was a small metal box, old and heavy. I opened it, and what I found nearly made me drop it. Stacks of documents. Bank statements. Property deeds. And at the very top, a letter addressed to Richard, written in elegant handwriting. It was from Emily. "Dad, I've handled everything. Mom doesn't need to know. Once it's done, we'll be free. Trust me." My hands shook violently. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Was this some kind of misunderstanding? Or was my own daughter involved in something Richard discovered? I searched deeper in the box and found a small flash drive wrapped in tissue. A label written in Richard's handwriting said, "The truth." I rushed to the corner of the cabin where an old laptop sat under a pile of newspapers. It took forever to power up, but when it did, I plugged in the flash drive. The screen flickered to life, and there, in a folder named Emily, were dozens of files, emails, bank transfers, messages. My pulse quickened as I clicked through them. Each message was between Emily and a man named Gregory Hale, my daughter's fiancé. They were talking about money, millions, and how to finalize things once the old man is gone. I felt my stomach twist. My hands went numb. My daughter, my only child. She had planned everything. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My daughter, my sweet Emily, the little girl who used to hold my hand and say she'd never leave me, had been part of something dark. I opened another email. "Once he's gone, everything transfers to my name. She won't question it. She trusts us both," Emily had written. She, that was me. I covered my mouth, trying to silence the scream building in my throat. My heart raced so fast it hurt. Could Emily have had something to do with Richard's death? The thought seemed impossible, and yet, the evidence was right in front of me. As I scrolled through the messages, the story became clearer. Gregory and Emily had been manipulating Richard for months. They convinced him to move the assets, sell properties, and rewrite parts of his will, all under the pretense of financial safety. Richard must have discovered the truth too late. That's why he wrote, "Trust no one, not even Emily." My hands were trembling uncontrollably. I unplugged the flash drive, stuffed it in my pocket, and paced around the cabin, feeling the walls close in. What should I do? Call the police? Confront Emily? Before I could decide, I heard the distant crunch of tires on the gravel path outside. My heart froze. No one knew I was here. I peeked through the dusty window. Emily's car. I backed away from the window, my mind spinning. How did she know I was here? The front door creaked open, and Emily stepped inside. Her face was calm to calm. "Mom," she said softly, "I was worried about you. You just disappeared." I forced a shaky smile. I needed some time alone. She glanced around, her eyes scanning the room like she was searching for something. "Dad used to love this place," she said. "I still can't believe he's gone." There was something in her voice, guilt, maybe, or fear. I tried to sound casual. "Did you ever come here with him? Before he passed?" Her eyes flickered. "No, why?" I shrugged. "Oh, nothing. I just found a few of his old things." She smiled faintly. "You should let go, Mom. Holding on to the past won't help." She stepped closer, her gaze locking onto mine. "Did you find anything?" The air between us turned heavy. "What do you mean?" I asked quietly. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You know, letters, notes, files. Dad liked to keep secrets." I swallowed hard. "No, nothing important." "Good," she said, her tone suddenly colder. "Because sometimes, Mom, the truth hurts more than lies." She turned toward the door. "Anyway, Gregory wants to invite you to dinner tomorrow. We want to talk about Dad's estate. Make sure everything's fair." Fair. As she left, her perfume lingered, the same scent I used to love, but now it made me sick. When her car disappeared down the road, I locked the door, sat down, and whispered to myself, "She knows." I had to act fast, before Emily did something I couldn't undo. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the cabin felt amplified, the ticking clock, the rustle of wind through the trees, the creak of the old floorboards. My mind kept replaying Emily's words. "The truth hurts more than lies." There was something chilling about the way she'd said it, something that told me she already suspected what I'd found. I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't trust her anymore. Not until I knew the full truth. The next morning, I packed the flash drive in my coat pocket and drove back to the city. I went straight to the law firm where Richard's old friend, Mr. Thompson, worked. He'd been Richard's lawyer for over 15 years. When I arrived, his secretary hesitated before letting me in. "Mrs. Walker," she said quietly, "Mr. Thompson's been expecting you." Expecting me? I stepped into his office. He was sitting behind his large oak desk, his glasses perched low on his nose, reading through a file. "Margaret," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "I was wondering when you'd come." That sent a shiver down my spine. "You knew?" I asked. He sighed. "Not everything. But Richard confided in me before he passed. He said if something happened to him, you might show up with a flash drive." I handed it over. "Then you know what's on it." He nodded gravely. "Enough to ruin some very powerful people. Gregory Hale isn't who he says he is. His real name is Gregor Haleski. He's been under investigation for corporate fraud for years." My stomach dropped. "And Emily?" He hesitated, removing his glasses. "Your daughter got involved with him long before Richard's death. She may have been manipulated, or she may have been complicit." Tears welled in my eyes. "She's my daughter, Mr. Thompson, my baby. How could she?" He cut me off gently. "Richard found out. That's why he changed the will. He was trying to protect you. But Emily discovered it before he could tell you the full story." My breath caught. "Are you saying she?" "I can't prove anything," he said quietly. "But Richard's heart attack wasn't natural. There were traces of digital tampering in his medical monitor. Someone had remote access." My whole body went numb. "You mean she could have helped? Or Gregory could have?" He interrupted. "Either way, it wasn't an accident." I couldn't speak. My throat tightened as the room seemed to spin. He leaned forward. "Listen carefully, Margaret. You need to leave town. Go back to the cabin. I'll contact the authorities quietly. Until then, trust no one, especially Emily." I nodded, frozen with fear. As I turned to leave, he said one last thing. "Richard loved you. Everything he did, even the cabin, was to keep you safe." I drove back toward the cabin in silence, my mind reeling. The man I loved had died trying to protect me, and my daughter might have had a hand in his death. But as I turned down the dirt road leading home, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Emily's car was already parked outside the cabin, and the lights inside were on. I froze in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Emily's silver sedan sat gleaming in the pale moonlight. Parked right outside the cabin, every instinct in me screamed not to go inside, but I had no choice. Everything needed to come out tonight. I stepped quietly out of the car. The wooden steps creaked beneath my feet as I approached the front door. The light from inside spilled through the cracks of the old cabin walls, flickering faintly. When I turned the handle, the door swung open. Emily stood in the center of the living room, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "Mom," she said softly, "you took your time." Her voice was calm, too calm. "I didn't expect you here," I managed to say. "Why are you?" She interrupted, her tone sharp. "You went to see Mr. Thompson." My heart stopped. "How do you?" She smirked faintly. "You think I don't know how this works?" Dad left breadcrumbs everywhere. He wanted to make sure I'd pay for what he thought I did. But he didn't understand, Mom. He never did. I stepped closer, my voice trembling. "Then help me understand. Emily, did you have something to do with your father's death?" Her eyes darkened, and for the first time, I saw something raw, anger, pain, regret, all twisted together. "It wasn't supposed to happen that way," she said quietly. "Gregory promised he just wanted the money moved, that no one would get hurt. But Dad found out. He threatened to go to the police." Gregory panicked. My stomach turned. "So, Gregory," she nodded. "He hacked into Dad's medical device, said it would just scare him, said he'd confess and back off. But something went wrong. He died, Mom, and I can't undo it. My legs felt weak. Emily, my God. Tears welled in her eyes. I wanted to tell you. I wanted to stop all of it. But Gregory said if I opened my mouth, he'd go after you. I reached out, but she stepped back. It's too late, she whispered. Gregory's on his way here. He thinks you have the flash drive. If he doesn't get it, he'll kill us both. Panic surged through me. Then we need to leave now. Before she could respond, the sound of crunching gravel filled the air outside. Headlights cut through the darkness, growing brighter, closer. Emily's face drained of color. That's him. We turned off the lights and ducked behind the old fireplace. My heart pounded so hard I thought he could hear it. The front door creaked open. Heavy footsteps echoed inside. A man's voice, smooth, confident, terrifyingly familiar. Emily. Gregory Hale. He stepped further in, his silhouette looming in the dim light. I know you're here. Both of you. Emily's hand found mine in the dark. She whispered, barely audible, Mom, if anything happens, promise me you'll forgive me. Before I could answer, Gregory's shadow fell across the room. And then, a click. The sound of a gun being cocked. The metallic click of the gun echoed through the tiny cabin like thunder. My breath caught in my throat as Gregory's dark figure stepped forward, his weapon gleaming under the faint glow of the dying fireplace. Come out, he said coldly. No more games. Emily squeezed my hand hard and whispered, let me handle this. Before I could stop her, she stood up slowly, stepping into the dim light. Gregory, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. You don't need to do this. Gregory's eyes locked onto her. His smile was twisted, almost pitying. You think you can talk your way out of this, sweetheart? You had one job, get me that flash drive. But instead, you led me on a wild chase. I didn't tell her anything. Emily snapped. She found out on her own. His gaze shifted toward the shadows where I was hiding. Then she dies first. I stepped out before he could take another step. Gregory, stop. I shouted. I know everything. I know about the insurance, the hacking, the lies, everything you made her do. For a moment, silence filled the room. Gregory's smirk faded into something darker. You should have stayed out of this, old lady. He raised the gun. I froze. And then, before I could react, Emily lunged. She slammed into his arm, knocking the gun sideways. The shot rang out, the bullet tearing through a wooden beam above my head. Run, Mom. She screamed. But I couldn't leave her. I grabbed the iron poker from beside the fireplace and swung. With all the strength I had left, it hit Gregory's shoulder with a dull thud. He roared in pain and staggered back. Emily dove for the gun. Gregory kicked her hard, sending her crashing into a chair. She cried out, but her hand still reached desperately for the weapon. He turned on me, fury in his eyes. You have no idea what you've just done. I held the poker like my life depended on it, because it did. You killed my husband, I said, voice shaking with rage. And you destroyed my daughter. It ends tonight. Gregory laughed, low and cruel. Your husband destroyed himself. I just gave him a little push. That was it. Something inside me snapped. I swung again, but he caught my arm midair and twisted it painfully. I screamed. The poker clattered to the floor. Suddenly, there was a flash, the sound of another gunshot. Gregory froze. His grip loosened. He looked down. Blood bloomed across his chest. Emily stood behind him, holding the gun. Her hands were trembling violently, her face pale as snow. He turned toward her, eyes wide with disbelief. You? He rasped, before collapsing to the floor with a dull thud. For a long moment, there was only silence broken only by our ragged breathing. Emily dropped the gun and fell into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. It's over, I whispered, holding her tight. It's over, sweetheart. But deep down, I knew it wasn't really over, because the truth still had to come out. and the world would never see us the same way again. The sirens cut through the stillness of the forest, growing louder as flashes of red and blue lit up the windows of the cabin. I held Emily close, trying to calm her trembling body. Gregory lay motionless on the wooden floor, his lifeless eyes staring at the ceiling. When the door burst open, 2 officers rushed in with guns drawn. "Drop the weapon," one of them shouted. Emily raised her shaking hands, tears streaming down her face. "He's dead," she whispered. "He was going to kill us." They moved in quickly, checking Gregory's pulse, then securing the scene. A 3rd officer approached me gently. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" I shook my head numbly. "No. But my daughter." Emily's knees buckled, and I caught her before she fell. The officer helped us both sit on the couch as paramedics entered to check our vitals. My heart pounded in my chest, the events replaying in my head like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. An older detective stepped inside, gray-haired, calm, and shocked. "I'm Detective Harris," he said, kneeling in front of us. "I need you both to tell me everything that happened tonight." Emily looked at me helplessly. I nodded softly. "It started with a phone call," I began. "My husband passed away years ago, but there were things I didn't know. Gregory was his business partner. He tricked my daughter into helping him with something illegal. When she tried to stop, he came after her." Harris listened quietly, scribbling notes. When I finished, he said, "We'll verify everything. But I'll tell you this, your daughter saved your life tonight." Emily let out a shaky breath. "He said Dad destroyed himself," she murmured. "What did he mean?" Harris frowned. "We'll look into it. But from what we've found already, your husband's death may not have been an accident." My blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" The detective stood. "I'm saying there's a good chance Gregory wasn't acting alone, and your husband may have been silenced, not just for money, but to hide something bigger." The room spun. All this time, I'd believed I'd buried my husband after a tragic accident. But now, was it murder? They took our statements, photographed everything, and covered Gregory's body. The paramedics insisted on checking Emily's injuries. She had bruises forming on her arms and face. As dawn broke outside, painting the trees in pale gold, I stood by the cabin door, watching them take Gregory's body away. His face was covered, but the darkness he left behind lingered in the air. Emily joined me quietly, leaning on my shoulder. "Mom," she whispered, "do you think Dad knew what Gregory was doing?" I looked out into the forest, the early morning wind whispering through the trees. "I don't know," I said softly, "but I think it's time we find out." Detective Harris turned to us before leaving. "Mrs. Latham," he said, "you and your daughter might want to prepare yourselves. The truth about your husband may change everything you thought you knew." And as his car drove away, I realized the real story, the truth was only just beginning. 2 weeks had passed since that horrifying night in the cabin, but sleep still eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Gregory's lifeless body and heard his final words echoing in my mind. "Your husband destroyed himself." Emily was recovering slowly, though the trauma ran deeper than bruises. She hardly spoke, spending most of her days sitting by the window of our small temporary apartment, staring into the distance. Then, one morning, I received a call from Detective Harris. His tone was grave. "Mrs. Latham," he said, "we've concluded our investigation into your husband's death, and what we found will change everything." He asked us to come to the station. When we arrived, he laid out several files on the desk, photographs, documents, and bank statements. My hands trembled as I opened the first one. "This," he said, "is your husband's real will. The one filed after his death was forged." I froze. "Forged? By who?" Harris sighed. "We believe Gregory worked with your husband's lawyer. Together, they changed the will to make it seem like most of the inheritance went to Emily, knowing she was too young to understand what was happening. But that's not the worst part." He slid another document toward me. Your husband discovered Gregory's illegal operations, embezzlement, fraud, money laundering, all under the company's name. He planned to expose him. But before he could, he died in what appeared to be a car accident. Emily's eyes widened. You mean, Dad didn't die by accident? Harris nodded slowly. We believe Gregory tampered with his car's brakes. He made it look like an accident, then destroyed evidence. When your husband's body was found, no one questioned it. I felt the air leave my lungs. My husband, the man I mourned for years, had been murdered by the man we trusted most. But why leave me just the cabin? I asked weakly. Why didn't my husband leave me more? The detective hesitated, then handed me one final envelope. Because he didn't trust anyone, not even his lawyer. He left a handwritten letter inside a safe deposit box, meant only for you. I opened it with shaking hands. It was his handwriting, familiar, firm, and filled with love. My dearest Anne, it began. If you're reading this, it means something has gone wrong. The cabin holds more than memories, it holds the truth. Look beneath the old oak floorboards. You'll find everything you need to protect yourself and our daughter. Tears blurred my vision as I read his final words. Forgive me for leaving you this way. I loved you both more than life itself. Trust no one but each other. That night, Emily and I drove back to the cabin. Under the creaky oak floorboards, we found a hidden metal box filled with hard drives, documents, and a confession video my husband had recorded before his death, naming Gregory and the lawyer as his killers. As the truth unfolded on the screen, I broke down, not just in grief, but in relief. He hadn't abandoned us. He had died protecting us. Emily held my hand, her eyes glistening. Mom, he saved us. I nodded, whispering through tears. He always did. As the sun rose over the cabin, painting the horizon in gold, I finally felt peace, not because the pain had vanished, but because the truth had finally set us free. And I realized something profound. Sometimes, even in death, love finds a way to protect the ones left behind. Thank you for listening to my story, I whispered softly into the camera. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And remember, trust is precious. Once broken, it can never be the same again. This is Tales by Granny, and I'll see you in the next story.